If your live stream audio is still a challenge for you, sometimes the weak link is not on the console, but after the console. So in today's video, we're going to talk through the ways that you can get the audio to your stream and some ways to make it better. Hey, if we haven't met yet, my name is James Attaway, and I help churches with their live stream and front of house audio and try to take out the mystery and frustration so that you can just get to having a great church service. If you're a pastor, worship leader, sound volunteer, or tech director, you have found the right place. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and welcome to the club of sound ninjas. When we're trying to get the signal from the output of our console to the input of our encoder or some way to combine it with the video to send it out over the internet, there's a few different cable types and connectors that you might run into. Some of them you want to avoid, like the first one that I'll talk about, which is an RCA connector. These connectors are calibrated for line level consumer, which is a lower level than line level professional, which is on the output of most of our sound consoles. The next type of connector, which is a little bit better, but not by much, is the 3.5 millimeter connector. You may have seen this for consumer level headphones, and it works fine for carrying a stereo signal, but we have to be careful with these, especially because with cell phones, often we have headphones and a microphone, which requires a different type of connector, even though it fits in the same kind of slot. Some 3.5 millimeter connectors have TRS, or tip, ring, and sleeve, while others have TRRS, so that you could have headphones and a microphone to go into your cell phone as well. You have to be careful that you're not using the wrong one here, because it can really mess everything up and make it so that there is no audio coming through your system, even though you could plug it in correctly. Now that we've talked about the ones that I don't like, let's talk about the ones that I do like. The first up is a TRS 1/4 inch connector, which looks a lot like the 3.5 millimeter connector, it's just bigger. While this looks like it could carry a stereo signal, and in the case of headphones it does, when we're talking about carrying pro audio level signals, we want to use one of these cables per side of our audio channels. Even though you could come out of the headphone output of your console to get into your camera or encoder, it's not recommended to do it this way. These cables are balanced, which makes it easier to reject noise that might get picked up by the cable on the way to the other device. Another balanced connector, which is much better, is the XLR connector, or the same type of connector that you'd plug into a professional microphone. These take up a little bit more room, so often some input devices will just have a 1/4 inch cable connector. And for the output of a console into the input of a camera or switcher, you can convert from TRS to XLR with no problems at all. They're both balanced, and each one will carry one side of your stereo signal. So if you want stereo, you'll have to have two. These are RCA connectors. You'll probably want to avoid these if you can. This one has 3.5 millimeter on the other end. So that's an adapter. If you have to use it, you have to use it, but I would recommend trying to avoid this if you can. Next up, we've got the 3.5 millimeter to 3.5 millimeter. This is what we might use to go into our something like an ATEM Mini Pro. You can see here that there's a tip, ring, and sleeve. So there's two little black bands there separating the three sections. So that would mean that it's stereo potentially, or balanced, but more likely unbalanced stereo. That's a little bit into the weeds. This can work. We're going to hang on to this for a little bit later, although it looks a whole lot like TRRS. So you can see there's an extra little black band on there and an extra little sleeve on there. This one is actually an adapter that goes from, TRS to TRRS if you're going into a phone. You could plug something like this into this, and then this into your phone for the mic input if you had to do it that way. So that's a possibility, although it would be mono and maybe not great. So function, yes. Awesome, no. And don't, this is for the microphone part. We've got earbuds, but it's got the microphone part to it, and that's why it's got that third thing on there. So be aware of that so you don't get tripped up. Put that aside. If you have to go 1/8 inch, my recommendation would be 2 XLRs into the 1/8 inch over here, although not perfectly reliable. This is actually male, so you could have to use a female to female adapter. Actually, let me grab my other one. The output on your board is going to be male, so these would actually need to be female. So then these female connectors go to this 3.5 millimeter on the other end, and this is what you would plug into something like an ATEM Mini Pro. For your ATEM Mini, you have this mic jack in the back here. So you would plug this in here and then connect the other end to your soundboard This one is the XLR female version, which is what you want. You have to make sure that this is on, right? It's got off and on there, so you could mute it. And the rest is on the software. There's a couple other settings we have to look at there, which I'll show you right now. ATEM software control, here's how you get to your audio settings to make sure that you're in the right spot. So first you want to go to your audio tab, and we want to turn both of these on. And if we're coming in stereo in mic 1 through our 3.5 millimeter connector, we're going to want to turn those on and pan these left and right so they get to the master in stereo, and then we didn't just collapse everything to mono. You won't probably need to trim up your mic pre or your input here, although you might need to trim it down. However, you have to go to one more setting, which is this gear wheel down at the bottom. And then on the audio tab, you need to switch this over to line level. I go ahead and do it on both just because, maybe one breaks and we need to switch it over. I'm already in here. I'm going to make sure that that's there. We hit done. And now we should be able to monitor our levels here and monitor our levels here as well. All of these so far have been analog components, which send a wiggling electron signal down the cable electrically, but we could send it digitally. Some digital consoles have a USB output so that it makes it look to the computer like you've got an audio interface, and you can select the digital patching within the console to show up at the computer in a fully digital signal so that there's no potential for increased noise or loss. Aside from USB directly from the console, you could use other protocols like Dante, MADI, or AVB. These are typically specific to your console or require an add-on card that goes in the back of it. Now let's talk about where that audio signal might end up before it gets to the internet. We have to combine the audio with the video, and a lot of times that's happening right at the computer that's accepting all of the video signals, and we just combine it all there inside the computer. Maybe you're using a program like OBS to send your stream out to the internet. In this case, the best choice that you have is to use a USB audio interface. If you want your stream to be stereo, you'll need 2 input channels, and you'll want to set them to line level, not instrument level. They might also have an input trim on the front, so you don't want to boost this up too much because the signal leaving our soundboard has already been boosted quite a bit. Now, if you don't hate yourself, by all means, avoid the 3.5 millimeter line input that's on the input of your PC's sound card. I mean, making it work is better than nothing at all, but you will get a vast improvement by spending a little bit of money on an audio interface to use a professional connection there. And as a side note, and not just because I'm an audio person, but great audio on your stream goes a lot farther than great video. So if the video is great, but the audio is lousy, people will turn it off. But if the audio sounds clear and everybody can understand and there's no noise or distortion, but the video's just okay, people will tend to hang around longer. And that's based on research, not just my opinion. The other way to combine the audio with the video is a switcher or an encoder. This is a device that's external to a computer, and it can combine the audio and video signals from the source that you select. Some of their inputs could allow you to plug a microphone directly into it or a line level signal like what would come off your soundboard. I'm sure this is handy if you just have one mic going directly into a video feed, but we probably have a lot of mics going into our video feed, so it's likely that you'll want to select line level instead of mic level on your encoder. One encoder I recommend is the Boxcast Spark. Here, let me show it to you. So here is the Spark. You can see I haven't even taken off the plastic cover for you. So we'll do that little peel action thing going on. So nice. All right. Set that aside, and let me give you the tour around here. On the top part of it, we've got our power input, which will show you what happens after we plug that in. USB-C to go to your computer, Ethernet to go straight to the internet, HDMI for your video input, and then it's got 1/4-inch TRS inputs. So these are balanced inputs that could come from your mixer. You could use an XLR to TRS connector to make that happen. Over on this side, these are the features that I really love. Right here we have a headphone output so that you can monitor what's actually going on in real time with your audio as it gets to the encoder. So final destination, right before it gets to the internet, you can hear it. It's also got a line input on 1/8 inch, or 3.5 millimeter. Don't love that, but it does have micro SD for local recording. That is super, super handy for being able to have a backup of your system or your backup of recording in case some internet problems persist. So let me grab our power cable, plug this in here. I have set this up previously, but if you haven't, it will take you through a tutorial of how to set it all up. The fan is a little bit loud, so I wouldn't keep this right next to front of house if you're wanting to keep things quiet. Nonetheless, it does work quite well. It takes a minute to boot up, so we'll wait just a minute. All right, so it's waiting for network. We could go through the tutorial, but I have a network cable right here, though it is possible to do it over Wi-Fi, but you know, reliability and such, we want to do what's best rather than what's convenient. And then the next thing I'm going to plug in is my HDMI. This is coming from a switcher, so I'm going to plug that in to get a video feed. You can sense that there's no audio, and there's the video. It's at 1080/30. And then I have a couple cables coming from my audio interface that I can plug in here. And then as I get playback from my computer, you'll be able to see that. So we can see a little preview of the screen there. It's connecting to Boxcast. It's not liking the Ethernet connection, so let me check that. It's still trying to work that. You can run a speed test. Thank you, Google Fiber. Yep, speed test looks good. So we're good there. We're connected. No scheduled broadcast. We would have to do that from the website in order to stand that. But now we're on standby. So you can see there's a little bit of audio coming in from some nature scene or something I got playing back on my computer. The volume we can control here, so we can see the headphone volume there. You can close that, but very nice touch screen. It gets to all the functions that you need. If you need to adjust your audio levels, you can come over here and tap that. You can gain up your input a little bit. If you're a little bit low coming from the console, you can give that a little boost. However, I recommend getting the levels right coming out of the console. Although it does leave you about 6 dB of headroom, so even if you have a slammed signal coming out of your board, it will be kind of padded down a little bit. So you could give that a little bit of a boost if you're feeling adventurous. And then your master output level is here as well. You can select your different inputs. Say if you've got audio coming through the HDMI, you could select that there and have its output level, but there's no audio right there. So we could keep that muted just in case something accidentally gets plugged in there. And then we can see our main output here. So that's the Spark in a nutshell, and pretty handy, like in these connectors and like in that headphone output. Now, I did just point out a bunch of these features of the Boxcast Spark, and if you're wanting to pick one up, I should let you know that there's also a monthly subscription for their service, but it does give you a whole lot of benefits, like being able to host your own video on your website, as opposed to rented space like Facebook or YouTube. And there are a ton of features for making social media clips out of your long form content. So if that's where you're at and what you're needing to do, it might kill two birds with one stone, getting you both the encoding and the hosting of your videos, and it makes it very easy to make short form content from that long form content. Now, to be fully transparent, they are the sponsor of this video, but I like to package stuff that's sponsored inside a lot of other learning content because I want you to come out with a lot of information, not just an infomercial. Again, if you have a switcher or an encoder, TRS or XLR is best, but if it has to have 3.5mm, go ahead and get a couple of those adapter cables, because often these littler connectors can get finicky and I've had some die on me. So if you don't have a spare, go ahead and pick one up or find something that's got TRS or XLR on the input. Sometimes the best way to get the audio and the video together is actually at the camera before it goes down the HDMI or SDI cable to your switcher, encoder, or computer. Your best option is to have a camcorder that has XLR inputs. Just be sure to set those to line level if you're doing that. It's also likely that you'll have some level trim controls on there, and you just want to monitor those so that they're not overloading, but you don't want to pull it so far down that your signal is weak when it gets to the computer or encoder. A lot of cameras have a 3.5mm mic input, which is made for putting a microphone right on top of the camera, and often these can be either noisy or they will easily distort. To help that, you could get an external preamp for your camera so that you can run your line level signal into that, and then that goes into your camera's 3.5mm input, gets married with the HDMI, and sent along its merry way. I used merry 2 times in 2 different ways, so pat yourself on the back if you caught that. The thing about these external preamps is often they're only battery powered, so you have to make sure that you have a fresh battery in at the start of service or no one is going to hear it. It is a weak link, and I would not recommend having your entire audio signal dependent on one 9-volt battery, but if you're really careful about it, you can make it work. If you're looking for one, I looked through a bunch of them, and the one that I picked out is the Saramonic SR-PAX1. That's a mouthful, but I'll drop a link to that down in the description below. Now, I'll say it again because I don't want you to get tripped up here. Some cameras only have mic level inputs, so they're looking for a much lower input level, and they'll boost it up a bunch. So sometimes this preamp is not there to boost the level up, but actually to trim the level down so that it's at a suitable level for your camera to receive. You can see why this is still not ideal, but I'm not going to shame you for not having the Benjamins to throw at a problem. I'm just going to try to help you make it work. If you're streaming from your phone or your tablet, it's still possible to get great audio in there, but you'll need an external audio interface that's designed to go into a phone either by USB-C or a Lightning connector. If you're looking for one of those, I recommend the IK Multimedia iRig Pro. It's got a line level input that can plug straight into your phone. The only problem is that it's mono. But if you're still streaming from a phone, I don't think mono is your biggest problem. Just know that you don't need to send 2 signals to it, just a single cable will suffice. The other thing I like about the iRig Pro is that it does have headphone input so that you can hear exactly what it sounds like right before it gets to the phone. It's always a good thing to be able to monitor before it gets all the way to the internet. Now that we've talked about the types of connections and how we're going to get it married with the video, let's talk about best practices for getting your audio levels up so that it's not so quiet that people can't hear on their devices, or it's not so loud that it's distorting and it's, just sounds like garbage. Anytime you can remove points of failure and make a simpler system, things are going to get more consistent and have less chances to fail. That's why I really like going straight into a switcher or an encoder like the Spark. If you have a camera with a preamp, you want to be able to monitor those audio levels on the camera right there so that you can make any trim adjustments to keep it from distorting before it gets passed on down the line. The type of meters that you're looking at on your camera are probably peak meters. Digital audio signals can only reach a certain point before they get chopped off and sound really bad, so we don't want to clip or distort them. We want to leave a little bit of what's called headroom, or distance between our normal operating signal and the maximum signal that input device can take. A good rule of thumb for this is to leave at least 6 dB of headroom, or to aim for the -6 on your meters. Normally, that's enough to get enough level out of your broadcast so that people can hear it at a reasonable volume on the other side. The problem that comes up is that sometimes our levels get loud enough to reach on our peak meters, but it still doesn't sound loud enough on the other end, and people are asking us why it's so quiet on the stream. That's because our ears hear more average levels than peak levels, and we hear some frequencies easier than we hear other frequencies. Because our ears are attuned a little bit more to average levels than they are to peak levels, we use what's called RMS, or root mean squared, to approximate more of the average level and ignore more of the peaks that our ears are less sensitive to. Taking it a step further is loudness units full scale, or LUFS, or LUFS. That's terrible to say. This adapts frequency response in addition to the average levels to tell us how loud something really sounds. Boxcast has added an update to allow you to meter RMS and LUFS inside of their platform, so you can check and see that your sound is consistent between the worship portion, which has a lot of level and energy and transients, and the speaking portion, which has a lot more averages. Here inside of Boxcast's dashboard, I've made a test broadcast and I'm playing back some tracks from my digital audio workstation. I've got it limited pretty good, and you can see we've got a music portion here and a speaking portion over here, so we can test both of those, but I want you to look at the audio metering over here. We can turn on and off the audio meter here, but these are the 3 ones that I want you to look at. Right now we're peaking at about -9. So you can see that our peak meters are hitting up pretty high, but there is still headroom. I could boost up the level here on the Spark itself to get a little bit more out of that, but this is probably going to be fine. I want us to compare the peak meters though with the RMS meters. So these are more of the average meters. The mix that I'm sending here was actually the front of house mix plus some crowd mics and limiting. So it's very high in the transient component. So you can see that our RMS levels drop quite a bit, compared to our peak levels. Now, I also want you to look at the LUFS, or the loudness units full scale, and with the LUFS during the music portion, we're still up at about -9. If I switch over here and go to a speaking portion, you can see here on the meters that the LUFS are actually much lower. And this was a corporate, like everybody says the creed along, with everybody. So, the speaking mics weren't quite as loud, but again, we can see that these are lower, so we could tell by our meters that we would need to go up on our level for the speaking mics going to the stream to get the same number of LUFS, or the same amount of audio level or audio perception on the other side. You would have a harder time measuring this just on a peak meter, so that's why I really appreciate having that LUFS feature. Now, when it comes to quality control, you have to have proper monitoring, or you have to be able to listen to the signal at various points. Maybe you've run into this where you listen to it at the output of the console, but then you listen to it on the stream at home and it sounds very different. So if we can listen to it before it gets to the internet, at the streaming computer or on the encoder itself, that can be very helpful for finding problems before they really become a big problem. The headphone output on the Spark is really handy for this, or you could use your computer's built-in headphone output in order to monitor if you're using something like OBS. Now, when it comes to processing the audio on your stream, I recommend that you try to leave it as flat as possible after it leaves the soundboard. We want to make the bulk of the adjustments right there on our console. There is a rare instance when I think you should add some dynamic processing to your stream, but that's a great way to get yourself in some trouble. For instance, one time I was helping a church with their stream and they said it really lacked any punch or sparkle. But when I looked at their processing, they had the low pass filter on the encoder and they had the high pass filter on the encoder. So all of that top and bottom end just got wiped away. Some people might recommend a limiter on your mix, and while I see that it could be helpful, it's not usually necessary. A lot of times we can get the signal level up high enough at the board so that we don't have to chop off all the transients in order to get it loud enough. And our church streams are not like recordings where there's a loudness war and we have to be just as loud as the other church, because nobody's listening to churches back to back. It's kind of a fool's errand to try to get your church mix as loud as possible. Plus, a lot of the streaming platforms actually limit the average levels so that they don't get blown away. So even if you're crushing it and sending it to YouTube, YouTube might just turn your maximum volume down some. So don't try to go down that path. Hey, thanks for watching to the end of this video, and I hope you got a lot out of it. If you did, go ahead and thank Boxcast for sponsoring this video by typing Boxcast in the comments down below. If you want to see more content like this, go ahead and mash that thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. And remember, it's all about the low end, avoid the sound tech solo, and nobody leaves church humming the kick drum. We'll see you back here next time on Attaway Audio.